The Galactic Council chamber floated in orbit above Tellus Prime, a massive station built to house the representatives of 47 different alien species. Inside the main hall, thousands of beings sat in tiered seats that curved around a central platform. The chamber was designed to inspire awe, with walls made of transparent metal that showed the stars beyond. Today, like every quarterly meeting, the council gathered to discuss matters that affected trillions of lives across the galaxy. Ambassador Hyunwoo stood at the human delegation's desk, his hands resting calmly on the smooth surface. He was a man in his 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many of these meetings. Next to him stood Ji-won, his deputy, a younger woman with sharp features and sharper instincts. She watched the other delegates with careful attention, taking notes on her datapad. The topic of today's session made Hyunwoo's stomach tight with frustration. The elder species of the council had proposed new taxes on frontier worlds. Most of these frontier worlds were human colonies. The taxes were not small. They would cripple the economies of dozens of human settlements and make it nearly impossible for new colonies to survive. Hyunwoo had prepared his arguments carefully. He activated the holographic display above his desk, showing trade data from the past decade. The numbers were clear and impossible to deny. Human colonies and human corporations provided 37% of all trade that moved through council space. Human merchants connected distant worlds. Human factories produced goods that were sold on every civilized planet. Human tax contributions already exceeded those of species that had been in the council for thousands of years. Honored delegates, Hyunwoo began, his voice steady and professional. I ask you to reconsider this proposal. The frontier colonies you wish to tax are barely profitable as it is. These settlements provide valuable services to the entire council. They are staging grounds for exploration. They are trading posts that connect the outer regions to the core worlds. If you impose these taxes, many of them will fail. He paused, letting his words settle. I have prepared alternative proposals. We can restructure the existing tax framework to be more equitable. We can create incentives for development that benefit everyone. I am willing to negotiate on any point. But I ask you to consider the consequences of this action. Councillor Vrath rose from his seat in the insectoid delegation section. He was a creature of hard chitin plates and multiple legs with compound eyes that glittered in the chamber's light. His voice came through a translator device, but the contempt in it needed no translation. The human speaks of consequences, Vrath said, and several delegates laughed. Let me tell you of consequences, Ambassador. Your species has been in this council for barely a century. You spread across the galaxy like a plague, claiming world after world. You bring your loud culture and your aggressive ways to civilized space.
And now you have the arrogance to tell us, the elder species, how to run our affairs?
More laughter echoed through the chamber. Hyunwoo felt Ji-won tense beside him, but he remained calm. He had heard such words before. Councillor Vrath, Hyunwoo replied. Humanity has never claimed to know better than the elder species. We have always shown respect to those who came before us. But respect must go both ways. We contribute significantly to the council's prosperity. We ask only for fair treatment. High Speaker Quiln, the bird-like creature who moderated the council sessions, ruffled her feathers but said nothing. She had the power to intervene, to call for order, to demand civilized discourse. She chose silence instead. For 3 days the debate continued. Hyunwoo presented economic models showing how the proposed taxes would harm not just human worlds, but the entire council economy. He showed how human shipping companies transported goods for dozens of other species. He demonstrated how human agricultural techniques had ended famines on 7 different worlds. He offered compromise after compromise, each one carefully crafted to address the concerns raised by the elder species. Each proposal was rejected. Sometimes with debate, sometimes with mockery, sometimes without any explanation at all. On the 3rd day, Councillor Vrath stood again. Perhaps, he said, the humans need to be reminded of their place. You are infants in galactic terms. Your homeworld was still divided into primitive nations when my species was building stellar empires. You should be grateful that we allow you to sit in this chamber at all. You should be grateful that we tolerate your expansion into space that rightfully belongs to older, wiser civilizations. The chamber erupted in applause from many delegations. Not all of them, Hyunwoo noted. Some species remained silent, their representatives looking uncomfortable, but enough cheered to make it clear where the majority stood. Yunwu looked at Jiwon. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. They had discussed this possibility. They had hoped it would not come to this, but they had prepared for it nonetheless. Hyunwoo turned off his holographic display. He gathered his data pads and organized them neatly in his case. The chamber slowly grew quiet as delegates realized something unusual was happening. "Honored delegates," Hyunwoo said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "Humanity joined this council in good faith 107 years ago. We came with hope for cooperation and mutual benefit. We offered our resources, our innovation, and our friendship. We provided protection to trade routes through dangerous space. We shared our medical advances freely. We helped rebuild worlds damaged by disasters and wars that happened before we even reached the stars." He closed his case with a soft click that somehow seemed loud in the quiet chamber. "We did all of this not for glory or power, but because we believed in the ideals this council claimed to represent. Unity, cooperation, the advancement of all civilized species. But it has become clear that these ideals do not include humanity. We are not seen as partners but as servants, not as equals but as children to be scolded and controlled." Hyunwoo picked up his case. Jiwon stood and gathered her materials as well. "If our presence in this council is such a burden," Hyunwoo said, "then perhaps we should reconsider our membership. Thank you for your time." He turned and walked toward the exit. Jiwon followed him. Their footsteps echoed in the stunned silence. Then Counselor Vrath began to laugh. Others joined in. The laughter grew louder as Hyunwoo and Jiwon left the chamber. "Empty threats from children," Vrath announced to the assembly. "No species has ever left the council voluntarily. They will be back begging for our forgiveness within a week." High Speaker Quiln called for a vote on the tax proposal. It passed easily. The council moved on to other business, already forgetting the humans who had just walked out. Outside the chamber, Hyunwoo and Jiwon walked through the corridors of the station toward their ship. Neither spoke until they were in the privacy of their shuttle. "Send the message," Hyunwoo said quietly. Jiwon activated her secure communicator. She transmitted a single coded phrase to Earth and every human colony in council space. The message was simple: "Come home." Captain Minho sat in the command chair of the HSS Defiant, a heavy cruiser that had patrolled the Outer Rim for 12 years. His ship was one of 47 human vessels that formed the defense network, protecting council space from pirates and hostile forces. The Outer Rim was the wild edge of civilization, where lawless groups preyed on cargo ships and small colonies. For over a decade, Minho and his crew had kept these routes safe. The message came through on his private channel. Just 2 words, but they were the words he had been half expecting, half dreading for years. He read it twice, then locked his screen and stood up. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship-wide communication system. "Prepare for immediate departure. We are leaving council space. Set course for human territory. This is not a drill." His crew responded with quick efficiency. No one questioned the order. They had all felt the growing tension, the increasing disrespect from council members, the way their protection was taken for granted, while they were treated like unwanted guests. Within 6 hours of Ambassador Hyunwoo walking out of the council chamber, every human vessel in council space began to move. Military ships like Minho's cruiser, massive cargo haulers carrying tons of goods, research vessels studying phenomena in deep space, small diplomatic shuttles, even the tiny repair drones that maintained human-built stations, all of them turned and headed home. It was the most perfectly coordinated peacetime military movement in the history of the galaxy. 12,000 ships, 300 stations, 57 colonies, all moving at once, all heading back to human-controlled space. There were no announcements, no speeches, no explanations given to confused alien officials who tried to contact departing vessels. The humans simply left. Admiral Yunji coordinated the massive operation from Earth. She was a woman who had spent 40 years in space, rising through the ranks to command humanity's entire military presence in Council territory. She had prepared these contingency plans years ago, updating them regularly, hoping she would never need to use them. Now her orders went out in encrypted bursts to every human commander in the galaxy. "Execute Withdrawal Protocol 7. Her messages read, "All personnel are to return to human space immediately. Take all equipment. Leave nothing behind. Maintain strict communication discipline. Do not engage with Council forces unless attacked. If attacked, respond with overwhelming force, and continue withdrawal. On Council world, strange things began to happen. Human-owned businesses closed their doors overnight. The owners simply locked up and left, taking their technology and their knowledge with them. Human students at universities packed their belongings and departed mid-semester, leaving confused professors and half-finished research projects. Human doctors and nurses at hospitals across Council space resigned simultaneously and boarded ships home. In the massive trading hub of Station Calyx, Trade Minister Kale watched in growing alarm as human cargo ships undocked and departed. Kale was an amphibious creature who had managed trade operations for 30 years. He understood economics better than most, and what he was seeing made his blood run cold. He pulled up shipping statistics on his terminal. 40% of all shipping in Council space was handled by human companies. 62% of advanced medical technology came from human manufacturers. Human agricultural corporations supplied food to billions of people across dozens of worlds. Human mining operations provided rare materials essential for advanced technology. And all of it was leaving. Kyle tried to contact the human merchants he had worked with for years. Their communication channels were closed. He tried to reach human corporate offices. The buildings were empty. He attempted to call Ambassador Hyunwoo directly. The diplomatic frequency was dead. He rushed to an emergency meeting of the Council's Economic Committee. Most of the other members seemed unconcerned. "This is a disaster," Kyle told them, his voice shaking with urgency. "The humans handle nearly half of our shipping. Their agricultural systems feed billions. Their medical technology saves millions of lives every year. If they actually leave, they will not leave," Counselor Vrath interrupted. He had bandages on one of his legs from a recent injury, an infection that was proving difficult to treat. "This is theater, a dramatic gesture to make us reconsider the tax proposal. They will realize they need us more than we need them, and they will return, probably with apologies. But the economic data," Kale began, "is irrelevant," Vrath said dismissively. "We existed for millennia before humanity appeared. We will continue long after they slink back to their little corner of space. Let them go. Good riddance." The committee voted to take no action. Kale left the meeting feeling sick. On the Outer Rim, the first attack happened just 3 days after Minho's departure. A convoy of merchant ships from 3 different species was traveling through a route that human patrols had kept safe for 15 years. Pirates appeared from the asteroid field where they had been hiding, waiting for exactly this moment. The merchant ships sent desperate distress calls. The Council's military vessels were 6 hours away. By the time they arrived, 2 ships had been destroyed and 3 more were badly damaged. The pirates had escaped with cargo worth millions. Similar attacks happened across the Outer Rim over the next week. Trade routes that had been safe for years suddenly became dangerous. Insurance companies immediately raised their rates for shipping through these areas. Some routes became so expensive to insure that companies stopped using them entirely. In the medical research facility on Talos 4, Dr. Sora was one of the last humans to leave. She was a specialist in genetic diseases, and for the past 2 years, she had been leading a research team working on a cure for the plague affecting insectoid species across several systems. Counselor Vrath's homeworld was one of the affected planets. Her alien colleagues begged her to stay. "We are so close," they told her. "Just a few more weeks of work." Sora looked at the research data on her screens. They were close, maybe 3 weeks away from a working cure. But the most critical data, the human genetic database that was essential for the final synthesis, was stored on human servers. And those servers were leaving with her. "I am sorry," she told her colleagues quietly. "I wish things were different. I truly do. But I have my orders. Can you not leave the database with us?" one of the alien researchers asked desperately. Sora shook her head. "That data contains genetic information from millions of human volunteers. It is protected by strict privacy laws. I cannot give it to non-human authorities. Not without their consent, which I cannot get." She backed up her personal research notes, wiped her terminal, and left. Behind her, the alien researchers stared at their incomplete work, knowing that without the human genetic database, they would have to start over from the beginning. That would take years. Thousands would die while they worked. High Speaker Quiln finally called an emergency session of the Council 2 weeks after the human withdrawal began. The chamber was noticeably less full than usual. Many representatives were dealing with crises on their homeworlds and had not come. "We must address the human situation," Quillen announced. Clearly they were more serious than we anticipated. "I propose we open negotiations." "Negotiations?" Councillor Vrath laughed, though he looked tired and unwell. "We do not negotiate with children throwing tantrums. They will come back when they realize how foolish they are being." But privately, even Vrath was beginning to worry. The plague on his homeworld was spreading. The human researcher who had been working on the cure was gone. His own infection was getting worse, not better. A junior counselor from a small species stood up hesitantly. "Honored speaker, I have tried to contact human authorities. All of our communication channels have been closed. The human embassy here is empty. Their colonies have declared independence and refused to allow our ships to enter their space." "Then we will send a military delegation," another counselor suggested. "Show them we are serious." Admiral Yunji's response arrived the next day. It was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring everyone in Council space heard it. "This is Admiral Yunji of the Human Defense Fleet. Humanity has withdrawn from the Galactic Council. We have no further obligations to Council space or Council law. Any attempt to enter human territory without permission will be treated as an act of war. Any attack on human vessels or human colonies will result in total war. We want only to be left alone. Grant us that simple request and we will not interfere with your affairs. We wish you well." The message ended. The council chamber sat in shocked silence. "Total war," someone whispered. They all knew what humanity was capable of. They had seen human soldiers fight. They had seen human weapons in action. Humanity had been protecting them, not threatening them for 100 years. But now they were neither protector nor threat. They were simply gone. 3 months had passed since the humans walked out of the council chamber. What had seemed like a dramatic gesture was now revealing itself as something far more serious. The cracks that started small were becoming chasms that threatened to swallow entire civilizations. Governor Thex stood at the observation window of Station Calyx, watching ships move through the docking lanes far below. The station was one of the busiest trade hubs in council space, or at least it had been. Now the traffic was maybe a third of what it used to be. The governor was a reptilian being with scales that had gone dull from stress. He had not slept properly in weeks. The problems had started immediately after the human withdrawal, but it had taken time for everyone to understand how deep those problems went. Human cargo ships had handled 70% of the freight moving through his station. The governor had always known this fact, but he had not really understood what it meant until those ships were gone. The remaining cargo companies were overwhelmed. They could not handle the volume. Goods sat in warehouses waiting for transport that never came. Some goods spoiled. Some were desperately needed elsewhere but could not be moved. Prices for shipping space went up 5 times, then 10 times their normal rates. Then the pirates came. Human patrol ships had kept the approaches to Station Calyx safe for years. Without them, pirates grew bold. They attacked convoys right at the edge of the station's defense perimeter. The station's own security forces were designed to handle internal problems, not external military threats. They were helpless against organized pirate fleets. Insurance companies raised their rates so high that many shipping companies stopped coming to Calyx entirely. Why risk losing a ship in pirate attacks when the insurance costs made the trip unprofitable, even if they arrived safely? Governor Thex had tried to hire mercenaries to patrol the shipping lanes. But good mercenaries were expensive and his station's budget was already strained. The few mercenary groups he could afford were incompetent or unreliable. Some were barely better than pirates themselves. He sent desperate reports to the council, begging for military protection. The council's military promised to send ships. Those ships arrived 2 months late, and there were only 3 of them to patrol space that had previously been protected by 40 human vessels. They did their best, but it was not enough. The attacks continued. Across council space, similar scenes were playing out at dozens of stations and hundreds of worlds. The infrastructure that everyone had taken for granted was simply gone. On the agricultural world of Terrace 2, the situation was even worse. Daehyun had been the CEO of the largest human agricultural corporation in council space. His company had operated on 14 different worlds, using advanced farming techniques that produced incredibly high yields. They had provided cheap, nutritious food to billions of people. When the withdrawal order came, Daehyun oversaw the systematic dismantling of every installation his company owned. The automated farming equipment was loaded onto cargo ships and taken back to human space. The genetically modified seeds that produced their high-yield crops were destroyed rather than left behind. The genetic patents and farming techniques were classified and locked away in human databases. The local governments of the worlds where Dahyun's company had operated suddenly found themselves with vast farmlands and no way to work them efficiently. They tried to hire local farmers to take over the land, but those local farmers did not have the knowledge or equipment to match human production levels. On Terrasta 2, food production dropped by 60% within 2 months. The population started to panic. Food prices tripled, then tripled again. People who had never worried about their next meal were now standing in long lines for rationed supplies. Riots broke out in several cities. The local government called for emergency aid from the council, but the council had no aid to give. The same crisis was happening on 13 other worlds simultaneously. The council's emergency food reserves were designed to handle 1 or maybe 2 worlds in crisis, not 14 at once. Those reserves ran out in the first month. Starvation became a real possibility for the first time in centuries for many council species. Ships carrying grain and vegetables became prime targets for pirates and desperate governments alike. Dr. Sora's departure from the medical research facility had consequences that took longer to appear, but were just as devastating. The plague affecting insectoid species continued to spread. Without the human genetic database and without Dr. Sora's expertise, the research team was stuck. They tried to continue the work on their own, but the final stages of the cure required synthesizing proteins that could only be derived from certain human genetic markers. The research team did not have access to those markers anymore. They tried to work around the problem, but every alternative approach they attempted failed. On Councillor Vrath's homeworld, the death toll climbed. Hundreds became thousands, then tens of thousands. Hospitals were overwhelmed. The medical equipment began to fail and replacement parts were no longer available. 70% of advanced medical equipment in council space had been manufactured by human companies. Those companies were gone, and they had taken their spare parts and their repair knowledge with them. Vrath himself was dying. The infection from his injured leg had spread throughout his body. The plague made it worse. The doctors told him there was nothing more they could do. The cure that had been 3 weeks away when Dr. Sora left was now years away, if it ever came at all. From his hospital bed, Vrath recorded a message to be broadcast across council space. His once proud voice was weak and broken. His compound eyes were clouded with pain and sickness. Humanity, he said, struggling to breathe. I spoke with arrogance and contempt. I dismissed your contributions and mocked your worth. I was wrong. My people are dying. Thousands have already perished from this plague. I am dying. I beg you, please send us the cure. Send us your doctors. We will pay any price, please. The message was broadcast on every frequency. It reached human space. There was no response. High Speaker Quiln called another emergency session. The chamber was less than half full now. Many delegates were dealing with crises at home. Others had given up on the council entirely and simply stopped attending. We must take action, Quiln said, her feathers ruffled and dull with stress. The human withdrawal is destroying us. We need to negotiate to offer them concessions to bring them back. Offer them what? Asked Trade Minister Kale bitterly. We have nothing they want. They are self-sufficient. They have their own trade networks, their own technology, their own military. What can we possibly offer them? A junior counselor stood up. We could offer them an apology, better terms, equal representation. 7 species have already left the council to seek independent treaties with humanity, another delegate said. They see what we are too proud to admit. We need humanity more than they need us. They never needed us at all. Quiln tried to hold votes to reform the council structure, to create new terms that might entice humanity to return. But with so many delegates absent, they could barely achieve quorum. Every proposal failed or was endlessly delayed. The military situation was getting worse. Without human forces, the council's military capabilities were revealed to be far weaker than anyone had realized. Human ships had been quietly handling the majority of actual combat operations for years. They had done it so efficiently that the council's own forces had atrophied. Now hostile powers that had been kept in check by human military presence were expanding aggressively. 14 council worlds were raided in the first 3 months. The Council's fleets arrived too late every single time. When they did arrive, they often lost the battles against enemies that human forces had routinely defeated. Minister Borum, who had been the chief human economic analyst for the Council before the withdrawal, gave an interview to a galactic news network from his comfortable retirement home on Earth. The interview became famous, shared and discussed across the galaxy. The Council made a critical mistake, Borum explained calmly to the interviewer. They confused human patience with weakness. They saw how we constantly worked to maintain peace and cooperation, and they interpreted that as submission. They did not realize that we were strong enough to walk away. What did humanity provide that the Council cannot replace? The interviewer asked. Borum smiled. Everything that matters. We built the shipping networks that moved goods efficiently. We maintained the security that kept trade routes safe. We developed the medical technology that cured diseases. We created the agricultural systems that fed billions. We solved problems so quietly and efficiently that most people did not even know the problems existed. Why did humanity do all of this if they knew they were not appreciated? Because it was the right thing to do, Borum said simply. Because we believed in cooperation and mutual benefit. Because we hoped that eventually our contributions would be recognized and valued. But there is a limit to every patience. When the Council showed us contempt instead of gratitude, we made a choice. We took our labor, our innovation, our protection, and our goodwill, and we came home. Do you think the Council will survive? Borum shrugged. That is their decision to make, not ours. We hope they do. We hold no hatred for them, but their survival is no longer our. 6 months after the human withdrawal, Councillor Vrath died. The plague that Dr. Sora had been so close to curing consumed him slowly and painfully. His final message to humanity begging for help had never received a response. He died knowing that his own arrogance had killed him and thousands of his people. The cure that could have saved them all was in human hands, and the humans had chosen silence. The death of such a prominent council member sent shockwaves through galactic politics. Vrath had been a leader of the Elder Species faction, the group that had pushed hardest for the policies that drove humanity away. His death was seen by many as poetic justice. Others saw it as a tragedy that could have been prevented. Either way, it was a symbol of how far the Council had fallen. Ambassador Hyunwoo watched the news of Vrath's death from a small house on the human colony world of New Haven. He was retired now, living quietly far from the political storms he had left behind. When reporters found him and asked for his reaction to Vrath's death, he was silent for a long moment. I take no pleasure in anyone's death, Hyunwoo said finally. Councillor Vrath was wrong about many things, but he was still a living being who deserved better than to die from a curable disease. The tragedy is not just his death. The tragedy is that it did not have to happen. His pride killed him. The Council's pride is killing millions. The reporters asked if humanity would reconsider their withdrawal given the crisis. No, Hyunwoo said simply. We will not be returning. That chapter of our history is closed. Across Council space, the crisis deepened with each passing week. The agricultural disaster on 14 worlds had now spread to affect food supplies galaxy-wide. The complex trade networks that humans had built and maintained were gone. The remaining shipping companies tried to fill the gap, but they lacked the efficiency and reach of the human operations. Food riots became common. Governments fell. Some worlds descended into chaos as their populations fought over dwindling resources. The Council tried to organize relief efforts, but they were overwhelmed. They had never needed to handle crises on this scale before because the humans had always been there to help. The military situation was even worse. Without human protection, piracy exploded across Council space. Pirates who had been afraid to operate while human patrol ships were present now ran wild. They attacked merchant convoys, raided small colonies, and even began threatening major trade stations. The Council's own military was revealed to be a paper tiger. They had impressive ships and sophisticated technology, but their forces lacked experience. They had been relying on humans to do the actual fighting for so long that their own military capabilities had withered. A major battle at the Kelvin Expanse demonstrated this painfully. A pirate fleet of 30 ships attacked a Council convoy. The Council sent 50 military vessels to respond. The pirates destroyed 12 Council ships and escaped with minimal losses. Human forces had routinely defeated similar pirate fleets with just 5 or 6 vessels. The Council Military Command tried to analyze what went wrong. Their conclusion was sobering. Human forces had better training, better tactics, better coordination, and better leadership. The Council had been coasting on human protection for so long that they had forgotten how to fight. Some Council members suggested hiring human mercenaries, but humanity refused. They were not interested in selling their services to the Council. They were busy building their own civilization, one that did not need or want Council interference. 7 species had already left the Council entirely by this point. They signed independent treaties with humanity, seeking trade agreements and protection pacts. Humanity accepted some of these treaties and rejected others, depending on how those species had treated humans during their time in the Council. High Speaker Quiln tried desperately to hold the Council together. She proposed reforms. She called for special sessions. She begged the remaining members to work together to solve their problems. But the Council chamber was now mostly empty. Of the original 47 member species, only 19 still sent representatives, and many of those representatives came only occasionally. The grand station above Tellus Prime, built to showcase the power and glory of the Galactic Council, was falling into disrepair. Entire sections were closed off to save on maintenance costs. The viewing walls that had once shown the stars now showed cracks that no one bothered to repair. The lights in some corridors flickered because replacement parts were not available. Quiln stood alone in the main chamber one day looking at the empty seats. She had been High Speaker for 20 years. She had watched the Council at its peak. Now she was watching it die. "We did this to ourselves," she said quietly to her assistant. "The humans offered us partnership. We offered them contempt, they gave us their best. We gave them mockery, and now we are paying the price for our arrogance." Her assistant was young, too young to remember a time before humans were in the Council. "Why did we treat them so badly?" the assistant asked. Quiln sighed. "Because they were new. Because they were different. Because they succeeded so quickly at things that took other species centuries to achieve. We envied them. We resented them. We told ourselves they were inferior because acknowledging their excellence would mean admitting our own inadequacies. Can we not apologize? Ask them to come back? We have tried. They do not answer. And honestly, why should they? We had our chance. We wasted it. No, we must learn to survive without them, if we can." On the medical research facility where Dr. Sora had worked, the team finally achieved a breakthrough on the plague cure. It had taken them 4 years. 4 years of work that could have been completed in 3 weeks if the humans had stayed. 4 years during which hundreds of thousands of insectoid people died. The lead researcher, who had begged Dr. Sora to stay, recorded a video statement that was broadcast across Council space. "We have developed a cure," he announced, but his voice held no triumph. "It will save many lives, but it comes too late for the hundreds of thousands who died waiting. I want to be clear about something. We did not discover this cure alone. We found it by building on research that Dr. Sora and her team had already completed. We simply had to recreate the final steps without access to human genetic databases. It took us 4 years to do what they could have done in weeks. Every death in those 4 years is on our hands. On our pride. On our foolishness." The broadcast ended with an image of Dr. Sora's empty workstation, exactly as she had left it years ago. The research team had kept it that way as a reminder. Minister Borum gave another interview, this time from his garden where he was growing vegetables. The contrast between the thriving human colony and the struggling Council worlds was stark. "People ask me if I feel vindicated," Borum said, pulling weeds from between rows of tomatoes. "I do not. I feel sad. The Council had so much potential. Humanity genuinely wanted to be part of something greater. We believed in the dream of species working together for common good. But the reality was that the elder species wanted servants, not partners. They wanted to maintain their superiority, not build something new." "What happens now?" the interviewer asked. "Humanity moves forward," Borum said simply. "We are building our own trade networks, our own alliances, our own civilization. And we are doing it with the species who showed us respect and friendship. The Council will either reform itself, or it will collapse completely. That is not our problem anymore." "Do you miss anything about Council space?" Borum smiled. "I miss some of the people. There were good individuals there. Smart, kind, honorable people who were trapped in a broken system. I hope those people find their way to something better. But I do not miss the Council itself, not even a little. Captain Minho, who had led the withdrawal of human military forces from the Outer Rim, was now an admiral in charge of human border security. His ships patrolled the edge of human space, ensuring no unauthorized vessels entered. He had standing orders to avoid contact with Council forces, but he also had orders to respond to genuine distress calls even from Council ships. When a Council science vessel sent out an emergency signal after their engines failed in a dangerous area, Minho responded. His ship arrived to find the Council vessel drifting helplessly. Pirates were closing in. Minho's ships destroyed the pirate vessels easily, then provided repair supplies to the Council science team. The Council scientists were overwhelmingly grateful. They tried to express their thanks, their apologies, their hope that this meant humanity was reconsidering the withdrawal. Minho listened politely, then shook his head. We are not returning to the Council, but we are not monsters either. You were in genuine danger. We helped because it was the right thing to do, not because we owe the Council anything. We do not. But surely, one of the scientists said desperately, surely humanity can see that the Council needs you. We are falling apart. We cannot survive without your help. Minho's expression was sad but firm. That is exactly the problem. You should not need us to survive. A healthy alliance is built on mutual benefit, not dependency. The Council became dependent on humanity while treating us with contempt. That was never sustainable. You need to learn to stand on your own. We cannot help you with that. We will not. He ordered his ships to leave. The Council scientists watched them go, understanding finally that the 20 years had passed since the day Ambassador Hyunwoo walked out of the Council chamber. A generation had grown up in a galaxy very different from the one their parents had known. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. What had once been a proud alliance of 47 species was now a struggling organization of 19 members, and even those members were questioning whether the Council had any purpose anymore. Young Councillor Drex stood at the observation window of the Council station, looking out at the stars. He was barely 30 years old, which made him one of the youngest counselors in the organization's history. He had been a child when the humans left. He remembered hearing his parents talk about it in worried whispers, remembered the food shortages and the fear that had gripped his homeworld. Now he was studying history, trying to understand what had happened and why. The official Council records painted one picture, but Drex had access to economic data, to communications logs, to the actual words spoken in that final session. The truth was becoming clear to him, and it was uncomfortable. The Council station itself told part of the story. Entire sections were closed now, sealed off because there was no money to maintain them. The grand chamber where thousands had once gathered could barely fill a quarter of its seats. The transparent walls that had offered stunning views of space were cracked and patched with temporary seals. The lights flickered. The air recyclers made strange sounds. Everything felt old and tired. Drex had requested access to the historical archives to write a report on the human withdrawal. What he found shocked him. The contempt that elder species had shown humanity, the dismissal of human contributions, the mockery and arrogance that had filled that final session. He watched the recordings and felt shame for his species and for the Council as a whole. He interviewed survivors who had been there. Most were old now, some were dying. They told him stories that were not in the official records. Stories of how humans had quietly solved problems no one else could fix. How human engineers had repaired critical systems. How human doctors had saved lives during epidemics. How human soldiers had protected worlds while asking for nothing in return. We took them for granted, one elderly counselor told Drex, coughing between words. We thought they needed us. We did not realize we needed them. Not until they were gone and everything fell apart. Across the galaxy, a young human historian named Ji-Wan was conducting similar research. She was the daughter of Ji-Wan, who had been Ambassador Hyunwoo's deputy during the withdrawal. Ji-Wan had grown up hearing stories about the Council from her mother. Stories about hope and disappointment, about trying so hard to make things work and finally accepting that some battles cannot be won. Ji-Wan spent 5 years researching and writing. She interviewed hundreds of people, both human and alien. She analyzed economic data from before and after the withdrawal. She studied military records and medical reports. She compiled everything into a massive historical study called The Silent Withdrawal: How Humanity Left the Galactic Stage. Her book became required reading in schools across human space and many other civilizations. The conclusion was devastating in its simplicity. The Council had become dependent on a member they treated with contempt. When that member left, the dependency was revealed and the structure collapsed. Humanity had not destroyed the Council. The Council had destroyed itself. The humans offered partnership, Jiwan wrote in her conclusion. They brought innovation, protection, and goodwill. They asked only for respect in return. The Council offered them mockery instead. So the humans left. They did not sabotage anything. They did not attack anyone. They simply withdrew their gifts. The catastrophe that followed was entirely the Council's own creation. The book included interviews with humans who had been there during the withdrawal. Many expressed sadness about what happened. None expressed regret about leaving. Minister Borum, now in his 80s and still tending his garden, had this to say: "We loved the dream of what the Council could be. We mourned when we realized it would never be that. But we do not regret leaving. We found something better out here. We found dignity." The plague that had killed Councillor Vrath was eventually cured by Council scientists working desperately without human help. It took them 14 years. A human medical team had been 18 months away from the same cure when Dr. Sora left. In those 14 years, millions died. Millions more were left with permanent damage from the disease. When the cure was finally announced, there were no celebrations. Only exhaustion and grief. Too many had died. Too much had been lost. Dr. Sora, when asked about the plague and the death, said simply, "I grieve for every life lost, but I could not stay in a place where my work was taken for granted and my people were treated with contempt. The knowledge was in human hands. If the Council had treated us with respect, those people would still be alive. That is on them, not on us." Over the 20 years, several attempts had been made to contact humanity about rejoining the Council. All received the same polite, formal response. "Humanity thanks the Council for their inquiry. We wish the Council well in their endeavors. We respectfully decline renewed relations at this time. We ask that our borders and our sovereignty be respected." Some Council members interpreted this as humanity holding a grudge, but the humans showed through their actions that this was not true. Human merchant ships traded with many former Council species. Human aid organizations responded to natural disasters across the galaxy. Human scientists shared research with alien colleagues who had shown them respect. It was not that humanity hated the Council. They simply had no interest in being part of it anymore. They had moved on. Captain Tae Yang was a young officer in the Human Border Patrol. He was born 3 years after the withdrawal, so he had no personal memory of the Council era. To him, humanity's independence was normal. The idea of humans being part of an organization that treated them poorly seemed strange and unthinkable. One day, while patrolling near the border of what used to be Council space, his ship detected a distress signal. It was a Council science vessel. Their ship had suffered a critical failure, and they were drifting in a dangerous area of space. Taeyang's standing orders were clear. Avoid contact with Council vessels. Do not engage. Let them handle their own problems. But the distress signal indicated life support was failing. People were dying. Taeyang made a decision. He brought his ship alongside the Council vessel and beamed over a repair team. His engineers worked for 6 hours to stabilize the Council ship's systems. They provided emergency supplies and medical treatment for the injured crew. The Council captain was overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Does this mean, are humans reconsidering? Will you come back to the Council?" Taeyang looked at the alien captain with genuine confusion. "Come back? Why would we do that?" "Because clearly you still care," the Council captain said desperately. "You saved us. You showed compassion. Surely that means, it means we are not cruel." Taeyang interrupted gently. "We will not let people die when we can help them. But that does not mean we want anything to do with your Council. We have our own civilization now. We are happy. We are free. We wish you well, but we are not coming back." "But the Council needs you," the alien captain said, and there was genuine pain in his voice. "We are falling apart. We cannot survive without humanity." Taeyang felt pity for the captain, but his answer was firm. "Then you need to learn to survive without us. Build something new. Fix what is broken, but do it yourselves. We are not responsible for your survival anymore. We never should have been." He ordered his team back to their ship. As they prepared to depart, the Council captain called out one more time, "Will humans ever forgive us?" Taeyang paused. There is nothing to forgive. You showed us who you were. We chose to leave. That is all. We do not think about you anymore. We are too busy building our own future. Ambassador Hyunwoo was 92 years old now. He lived in the same small house on New Haven, where he had retired 20 years ago. His hair was white, his movements slow, but his mind was still sharp. Young people often came to interview him, to hear his stories about the council days. A reporter visited him one afternoon. They sat on his porch watching the sunset over the colony's fields. The reporter asked the question everyone always asked, "Do you regret the withdrawal?" Hyunwoo was quiet for a long time, thinking. "No," he said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the council could not see what we offered them. I regret the deaths and suffering that followed. But I do not regret our decision to leave." "Why not?" "Because staying would have meant accepting disrespect as the price of membership," Hyunwoo said. "It would have meant teaching our children that it is acceptable to be treated with contempt as long as you are useful. That would have been a far greater tragedy than anything that happened after we left. Some people say humanity abandoned the council in their time of need." Hyunwoo smiled sadly. "The council was in need for decades before we left. We were the ones meeting that need. We were the ones protecting their trade routes, curing their diseases, feeding their populations, maintaining their infrastructure. We did all of that while being mocked and dismissed. When we left, we did not create their problems.